To the channel. First thing I want to do is apologize. I guess yesterday when I did a video, there was a lot of background noise, and that's because I had the fan going, because in this room it has a kind of a big picture window that faces west, and so in the late afternoon and evening it gets pretty toasty in here. And so I had the fan on to keep from sweltering, basically. So I decided, maybe I'll do the videos in the morning where it's not quite so hot. And it's about, let me look, it's right about, almost about 9:45 right now or so. So it'll, about another 3 or 4 hours, it'll start getting toasty in here. But anyway, I do apologize. I'll try to do these in the mornings so far, or going forward, and so we don't have the background noise. If you do hear any background noise in this video, it might be my stomach growling, or it might be my dog over here chewing on its rawhide bones. Sometimes he makes quite a bit of noise chewing on those things. All right, so let's get into it. The question that I asked is, does law enforcement ever lie to the public? Does law enforcement ever cover anything up? Well, the short answer is yes, and it happens all the time. I can speak from personal experience. I know that where there's been many times the public's been just outright lied to. I mean, I've seen where the agency will even publish things in the newspaper denying things and just outright making up stories and lying to people. Even in a department that I worked for. So I know that it does happen. How many YouTube videos have you seen out there? If you look up like crooked cops, how many videos have you seen, like even just on YouTube, where they've caught officers planting drugs on people, then arresting them for it? Or I know there was a term that they used to use, they probably still do, but the term was a throwaway gun. And it was an unregistered gun, or registered to somebody else, gun that they would carry. So if they ended up shooting somebody, they could plant the gun on them and claim it was in self-defense. Of course, this is long before these body cams and dash cams and all that stuff where it records the whole thing. So even then, if you're sneaky enough, you could still get away with it. But I know that kind of stuff has occurred. It hasn't occurred with any of the departments that I worked with, but I do know that it has occurred. And like I said, that term throwaway gun was very prevalent. About however long ago it was. Before all the videos and stuff, and everybody had video, had cameras, where they could video everything. So, but back before all that, throwaway gun. That right there tells you, there was a lot of dishonesty going on for it to be such a common term. I don't know if the public was aware of the term, but I know within the law enforcement community, throwaway gun was a very common term. So I guarantee you there's been a lot of incidents where either the person was innocent or they were shot unjustly, and then a gun was planted on them to try to explain it away, and the officer went away scot-free. We know that there is a lot of corruption in law enforcement a lot of times. Look at how many cases, and you can Google this as well, or search it on YouTube, where officers have been involved in distributing drugs, where they've done a shakedown on dealers and actually gotten in on the action and extorted money from these drug dealers. I know instances where they have actually taken evidence on a drug bust or something like that, and the officers have gone into the evidence locker, taken out the cocaine or whatever drug it was, and then distributed it on the street. I don't know how they got away with it, but at some point there had to be some accountability at where the evidence went. But depending on how high up the corruption went, maybe not. At any rate, it's obvious that there are a lot of crooked cops out there, and there always will be. Some of them get caught, but a lot of them don't. I know there's one instance in particular, and this is when I first started. I was training, and we were working at night. It was like swing shift, I believe, or graveyard. I don't remember, but it was really, really late at night, and we're driving around. And of course, one of the things that I think it was graveyard, because on graveyard, one of your main objectives is building security. We would actually walk alleys and go and shake the doors, at the back of businesses down on Main Street, and make sure that they were secured. And every once in a while, we'd find an open door. We'd call the manager down there to secure it. But in this one night, we're out in this one area of town. It was kind of like a strip mall type area, but it wasn't stores. It was mostly businesses and state offices. And we're driving around. We drive around the front of the health and welfare building, and we drive around the back. And there's a county sheriff's car sitting there, and a window open. And just as we pull behind there, we see this deputy coming out the window of the health and welfare office. And so we're like, hey, what's the deal, And he said, he says, I was driving by here and the window was open, so I went in to check it out. Well, number one, he's a county deputy. I mean, even though he does have jurisdiction in the city limits, the proper procedure would have been, if he drove by there, saw an open window, that he would call a city officer down there to back him up. And you'd always call for backup anyway, because there could be somebody inside there with a gun. So if you drove by a business and saw a window broken out or saw an open window, the first thing that you would do is call for backup. He never called for backup. But we kind of, we laughed it off or whatever, and really didn't think much about it, because you tend to trust your coworkers and your fellow police officers, right? We thought it was kind of weird. Well, we got discussing it later, and like, why didn't he call us? Why didn't he? Because, in that small town where I was working, which is actually my hometown, where I'm back living now. And at the time, it was only a a burg of about 4,500 people. So we only had one patrol car on duty in graveyard. A lot of times we'd have two until like maybe 1 or 2 a.m. and then, you'd have one until the next officer came on about 6 or 7. Whatever time. I think it was about 7 o'clock when the next officers came on. And, or 6. I don't know. I can't remember now. It's been too long ago. But the thing was, we were the only car. So the fact that we weren't called was, as I look back on it now, extremely suspicious. But at the time, of course, I was just like a dumb kid, rookie, and I just like, yeah, okay, well, he didn't think much about it. Later, it turned out that this deputy had been burglarizing businesses consistently. Also, he worked as an EMT for the local ambulance. And it turned out, this is how they caught him and then figured everything else out too. Because they got a search warrant and went to his residence and found all these things that had been burglarized from these businesses, or at least a great majority of the stuff, whatever hadn't been pawned off or whatever. And but how they caught him was that one night he was on a call as an EMT, and they caught him. I think it was on a fatality. or I think the guy had a heart attack or something like that. He was dead. And the guy, the deputy, had taken the guy's wallet, had pulled it out of his pocket and stuffed it in his jacket pocket. And somebody saw him do it. Well, then as they began to investigate, it turns out that on all the calls that they went on where he was present, there was property or money missing from the victim. He was taking their wallets, taking the money out and putting their wallet back in their pocket, or he was just taking the wallet altogether, like in this case, when the guy was dead. Man, I mean, how low can you go? So, anyway, they ended up finding him guilty of a bunch of this stuff, finding him guilty of these burglaries, and I think he ended up going to prison, which served him right. So yeah, you're talking, this is in a small town. I don't know what the population of the county was back then, but I know that the town that I live in, it's the county seat, and by far the largest of the towns that are in the county. There's only three towns that are in the county. And one of them was a little smaller, and the other one is much, much smaller. Only has like 1,200 people, even now. So we're not talking about a great population, but even in a small department, you have corruption like this. It might have only been one guy, but still, you just wouldn't expect that in a smaller county. And so you start getting into these larger areas, where it's much easier to get lost in the crowd. It makes it much easier for an officer or a dirty cop to, get away with things, or at least attempt to. There's a few other cases, too, where I know that there was one case in particular, and this is also when I first started. We had a guy that I think we brought in for drunk driving, I believe. And the guy was kind of being a little bit combative, and the other cop that I was working with just beat the crap out of him, started slugging him and doing all this stuff, and the poor guy's laying there. We got him on the ground, and he's smacking him in the ribs, and the poor guy's like, oh, okay. Well, in the report, he said, that he, what was it? I know he said he rolled him over. And everybody was kind of laughing about it, That, yeah, you rolled him over. I said, yeah, you rolled him over all right after punching him in the ribs about 8 times. So, there goes my phone. I meant to put it on silent. So anyway, there was another place when I was working as a deputy in the county it was the next county up, and they brought a guy, and I was just riding along with one of the guys because I was bored. I was single. And so a lot of times on my day off, I'd go like ride with the city cops or whatever. I had a lot of good friends on there. And they brought this guy in one night, and I think it was also for drunk driving. And the guy really wasn't being combative or whatever. He was just kind of being a butthole. And the officer just started smacking him in the face. I mean, just, bam, 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 bam. I mean, punching him hard. And I'm just kind of like, I'm just kind of standing there like, what the hell? I mean, boy, the poor guy, yeah, he shouldn't have been drunk driving, but also, too, I don't think he was doing enough for the cop to just start punching the crap out of him. And, of course, things like that aren't included in the report. He didn't say, the suspect was being uncooperative, so I beat the crap out of him. Yeah, you're not going to see that in the report. There's a lot of things that are go on behind the scenes. And like I say, nowadays it's a little bit harder to get away with that because you've got the body cams, you've got the dash cams, you've got other people that may be on the scene taking videos. And so it's much, much harder to get away with stuff like that than it was back, because we're talking, this is back in, God, what was it, 19... 76 or 77. Yeah, I'm an old fart. So this is back in there, 76 or 77 was when I was working at the sheriff's office there. So, stuff like that used to go on all the time. I know of another instance where the sheriff's office here chased a guy. He was driving drunk. And they chased him into Oregon, from Idaho. And they stopped him, and he was drunk, and they arrested him. And the guy's like, well, I'm in Oregon. You guys can't arrest me here, can you? And they were like, yeah, if we couldn't, we wouldn't be doing it. So they brought him in, which was totally illegal. They arrested him in Oregon, brought him back into Idaho. And then the dumbass went in and pled guilty. He didn't even fight it. So I guess they said he was totally wasted. So maybe, he didn't even remember the fact that he'd driven into Oregon, which wouldn't surprise me. But still, I had a real problem with it. Because they should have actually called the police department in Oregon, of the town that they were in. They should have called them, had them come to the scene, and then the Oregon officer make the arrest. But they didn't even bother doing that. They just brought him back across the border. And that, if the guy would have been smart enough to fight it, he'd have won. Because it was a total illegal arrest. And they actually could have been, the sheriff's office actually could have been sued for false arrest because of the fact it was an illegal arrest in another state. So, it's stuff like that, Now, they could have written him a ticket because there's law if you're pursuing somebody and they go into another state, which he did on purpose, and, if you're in pursuit of that vehicle, then you can legally write them the ticket. However, and in Idaho, I don't know how it is in a lot of other places, but in Idaho, when they write a citation, you're required to sign it as a promise to appear. If you refuse to sign the citation, they can arrest you. Now, I don't think you can now because back then traffic violations were misdemeanors, and now they are infractions, which is a completely different animal. But back then, when all this was going on, traffic violations were a misdemeanor, and you could be arrested if you failed to sign the ticket. So they could have issued him a citation, and then if he refused to sign, they still would have had to call an officer from that city in Oregon to make the arrest. They could not legally arrest the guy because they don't have jurisdiction in Oregon, even though they were in pursuit, so to speak. So yeah, there's a lot of corruption that goes on. So like in the Kylie Rodney case, the fact that there might be a cover-up, especially considering how cultish that area is, and it being a commune for the most part. But that doesn't go for everybody there. I know that there are people there who are kind of ticked off at the whole situation and want, justice for Kylie. But you don't know who has influence, because especially in a smaller area like Truckee, you're going to have a lot of politics involved. I know from working in small towns, there's always a lot of politics, especially if it's a higher profile person who is arrested. Yeah, there's going to be a lot of loopholes. There's going to be a lot of manipulation. So, yeah, law enforcement does lie to the public. So until we can actually look, when they get done with the investigation and all of that becomes public information, or at least that now there are going to be some things that aren't public information. It's always going to be like that. But I'd like to look at all the reports. I'd like to look at why they did what they did, how they went about it, how they made the decisions they made. I'd really like to look at that because they've got some major issues to address. They've got some mighty hard questions to answer. And I honestly, be honest with you, I wish I could go. I wish I had the authority that I could go over there, sit them down, and say, "What's up?" Because I just get so frustrated. I can't even hardly talk when I start doing this. My brain starts blowing up. I start getting, because the whole thing just infuriates me. Anyway, that's it for this video. If you want to hear anything more, let me know. But that's my 2 cents worth on the matter. That I know for a fact that the public gets lied to, and there are cover-ups. There's no doubt. I mean, there's been cover-ups. In fact, a lot of you have mentioned in the comments of other cases where it was a complete cover-up and it's been proven it was cover-up. So I would find it a little bit harder for them to cover the Kylie case up with all the public scrutiny. But I guarantee you, once they get done with the investigation, that they're going to do everything in their power to withhold as much information as they can and only release what they want us to hear or read. So I don't know. We'll see how it all plays out, but I can tell you one thing. If they come out saying Kylie is either an accident or a suicide, no. If they come out and do that, we all need to be bulldogs and go after them. Because we know that's not right. Anyway, I'm going to be doing another video on I can't even talk. I'm trying to figure out how to say this without getting flagged. Anyway, I'm gonna do another video after I get done with this one, so just watch for it, okay? All right, catch ya.